The World Cup of Bad Games. Generation 3 Tournament.
Now, welcome back to the World Cup of Bad Games. This right here is the Generation 3 Tournament. Here are the criteria for this generation. No homebrews, no educational titles. I see you, Donkey Kong Jr. Math. No adult entertainment titles, again. No card games or board games. I see you as well, Taboo, The Sixth Sense. No multi-card titles, aka Action 52 or any other multi-card games. No unlicensed titles. No prototypes. There are 4 systems this time around, so here are the brackets. The quarterfinals will be played out like the FIFA tournament, with the winning games moving on, seeded number 1 and 2, with the winners staying on their side of the bracket and the second seeds moving on to the opposite side of the bracket. Enough talk, let's begin. First up we have the Sega SG-1000, released in July of 1983 in Japan and saw limited release in New Zealand and Australia. It was Sega's first home console. The SG-1000 brings these 4 games to the bracket: Bomberman, N-Sub, Orgis, and James Bond. Next up we got the Nintendo Entertainment System, originally released as the Famicom in Japan in July of 1983 as well. It arrived to the States in 1985. It was hard to narrow its library of bad games down to 4, but here they are: Super Pitfall, X-Men, Dragon's Lair, and Ghostbusters. Next we got the Sega Master System, also known as the Mark III in Japan. It hit the market in 1985 before coming to the States in 1986. The Master System has F-16 Fighter, ALF, Heroes of the Lands, and Pit Fighter. Last but not least, the Atari 7800, a system that was left on the warehouse shelves for years because Atari management was just hell-bent on spiraling their console market to a fiery, horrifying crash, gets released finally in 1986 and brings these titles to the tournament: Touchdown Football, Hat Trick, Karateka, and Baseball. The brackets are all set for all the consoles. I will go over all the games in brief detail and skip the group play so we can go ahead to the 2 finalists on each group bracket. Let's go. First up, it's the SG-1000 bracket. Bomberman is a title that I think we are all familiar with. The title here was one of the first. It was ported to the SG-1000 from the MSX computer version. Most of us are used to the NES version. Usually most of us play that one. So when playing this one, you're going to see it's a bit slower. Actually, it's overall slower. Placing bombs and waiting for them to explode, it's an exercise in patience. Trust me, good luck playing this one for more than a few minutes. I couldn't. Next up, N-Sub, a game that takes place entirely in a single screen. You control a submarine that can shoot forward and up at the ships above. The pacing of the game is just very, very slow. This right here, this is the game. You're looking at it. It never changes screen. It doesn't go beyond this. It's boring. You are stuck here forever. Or until you turn the game off. It's like an Atari game, but released in 1983 for a newer console. And yet, we got this. Horrible. Just horrible. James Bond is somewhat like its 5200 counterpart. You play the game controlling the Bondmobile and you have to travel on land or sea as you shoot your way to victory. It plays much faster than the 5200 version, and the overall play screen is zoomed out here a bit more, giving you more of a view of the playing field and what's coming up front. The tricky part here is the controls, since the Bond car can only dip or hover in short bursts, so timing here is everything. Orgis, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is an interesting title. It's actually a side-scrolling shooter where you can transform into a robot or play as a fighter plane. If you play as the plane, you move faster and the stages are timed, so it's best to play in the airplane mode. The levels are repetitive. The action is not that great. Overall, the gameplay gets boring after you realize there's very little variety. You are either flying over a grass field, over the ocean, or this checkered flag looking place. Then they repeat again and again. Your firing cannon on the ship, it's low, and very few enemies appear on the screen, or at all sometimes. And there's no end bosses here. The NES is next. First off, it's Ghostbusters. Now, we have all seen the videos online regarding this game, but if you were unfortunate enough to actually have purchased this title or even renting it, you got hosed. You got hosed big time. The gameplay, it's almost non-existent here. You'd figure a game where you shoot beams and capture ghosts would be a clean canvas for the developers to embrace and shine, with great gameplay possibilities. We get tedious micromanagement regarding purchasing equipment. Gee, how exciting. We got driving segments that made you wish for a cliff to appear so you could drive off of it and be done with it. And the map, it makes little sense other than knowing where to go next as far as the ghost appearing. The stairway scene, I'm not even going to talk about it. It's a nightmare. It's just a nightmare. The only segment somewhat close to the flick is the one where you trap ghosts, and even that part is messed up. A cash grab without any doubt in my mind, and an all-around trash-worthy title. Next one is X-Men. I was a huge X-Men comic fan when I was younger. Luckily for me, I played this game before I became a fan of the comics, so for that, I dodged the bullet. Momentarily, because I did eventually rent it for the weekend. The bullet found its mark. Another crappy way to drop the ball on such an opportunity. Here is a team of individuals, each with unique powers. One could fly and shoot lightning, another has metal claws, and another can teleport. The possibilities for gameplay here were great. Here's the short version of this review. This game sucks. It sucks. The levels are just mishmash tiles that are just put together on the fly, randomly. Nothing makes sense, nothing. You can't tell what is a wall, or a solid object, or what is the floor. The characters all pretty much look the same except for their colors being swapped. It is as lazy as video game design gets in those days. It's like someone was experimenting to see if monkeys could program a game, and this here is the result. Hey, congrats to the monkeys, but you know what? The game, it still sucks. Dragon Slayer. Now, when you go from this, and then try to ram any sort of gameplay that is related to the story and characters in the arcade, requires good imagination and proper planning. None of that happened here. None. None whatsoever. Not even close. If you played this game for 5 minutes, that's 6 minutes too long. It is horrible. It is slow. It has one of the worst hit detections in any NES game. Many things kill you with one hit, making that health bar that you see up there, it's almost useless and just cruel. If, that's a big if you can even get to level 2, you have achieved something less than 0.1% of gamers have done so. Willingly, this game should be against the law to play. Super Pitfall is a super fail. After playing Pitfall 2 on the 2600 and seeing the possibilities of a character that explores caves and ruins, and then getting this train wreck of an abomination of gaming programming has got to be one of the biggest disappointments of my younger gaming years. And I still want a refund in 2022. The cavern layout is atrocious. There are ladders that lead nowhere, cliffs that lead to spikes, dead ends, really obscure warp points. Don't even get me started on that dead world portion. There is no password system, no save feature. At least you can continue. The manual is vague. How vague? Well, let's look at this here. It says that the items that you need to collect are invisible. So you need to jump everywhere to find them. What in the f***? This is the biggest piece of in the whole world. What a piece of Next up is the Sega Master System. With Alf, you take control of the alien as he looks for parts to repair his ship, which are scattered around town. The hit detection on this game is bad. You have one-hit kills and no passwords, or some kind of a battery backup to help you as you progress. The controls in the gameplay are really bad here. Ducking barely helps you avoid enemies. If you lose all your lives, you have to start the game all over again. Oh gee, what excitement, huh? I can't imagine paying any amount of actual money to have played this back in the day. If you were a fan of Alf, after watching the TV show, you weren't after playing this game. Heroes of the Lands looks great. It looks awesome. Too bad the visuals is only part of the gaming experience. Had I seen pictures of this game on a magazine back then, I would have marched up to my dad and demanded that he buy me a Master System. Would probably have slapped the soul out of my body, but you get the gist of where I'm going with this. It looks great, it looks awesome, but the super slow gameplay brings down that experience immediately. Your characters move slow, very slow. I mean, you can dash through it, but the overall movement when walking and fighting, it is so slow, so painfully slow. The menus are clunky, and overall, the game makes little sense or has any feel of a decent flow. Shame too, because this game had potential, just looking at it. Lots of potential. This one actually hurts. F-16 Fighter. Now, you know most of us gamers back in the 8-bit days grew up playing Top Gun. It wasn't the best, and we made fun of it, sure, but those of us on the NES side of the fence had no idea just how lucky we were. Yeah, Top Gun had its issues, sure, but oh man, did the guys over on the Master System side get crapped on with their version of a cockpit fighter jet simulation game. What is most annoying is that the Master System could have done so much better with the graphics. If the gameplay is going to be that bad, at least make it look good. But this game misses the mark on both departments. The white dot grid lines are very out of place here. The planes dart in from the distance with little detail. Your controls are very stiff, and it takes a while to get your reticle in firing position. Even the HUD is a mess to look at. It's horrible. Oh, look at that. They could have done better. This one is a chore to play. In the early 1990s, there were two things that were coming up big, and that was digitized graphics and fighting games. And if you were in the arcades, you would come upon a game called Pit Fighter from Atari, and it wanted to cash in and grab a piece of that pie. And then somebody, somewhere, some developer, some programmers decided, hey, let's put it on the Master System, even though it has no business being there. Remember that scene from Jurassic Park with Dr. Malcolm?
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't start to think they should. You patented it, and packaged it, slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You want to sell it. Well,
Okay, now take that concept and put it over to video games. Some things, just because they can be done, should not be done. Pit Fighter is a great example of that. It has horrible graphics. Digitized graphics are nowhere to be found, not even slightly. The developers, they had no intention of making a good port. They just wanted to do a quick cash grab. They wanted to cash in on that popularity of the fighting game genre and the digitized graphic genre, even though there's no digitized graphics here. I feel bad for all the Master System owners out there that had bought this title when it came out. That was a big kick in the ass. Now, last but not least, we got the 7800. First up, we get Karateka. This title was released on many platforms and computers, so this version here is actually one of the worst. I would explain the controls, but they are so oddly mapped out that it would take a while to explain it properly. But you know what? Trust me, it's horrible. Horrible. The hit detection is a bit off as well. Your character moves slow overall, and most of the cinematic cutscenes, from what I can tell, are pretty much missing here. Avoid this one if you are an Atari 7800 fan. Next up, Touchdown Football. Graphically, it isn't on par with the NES or Master System football games of that time. The graphics, they're a huge step backwards. The overall action, it's slow. It's hard to figure out what player you are taking control of, and the play menu is non-existent, other than the choices popping up on the top of the screen here. No layout of the plays are ever visible on screen. No crowds, no details on the field, no actual teams, not even fictional ones. The best thing to have done back then was to just turn the game off and to go to your friend's house, who just happened to have an NES and a copy of Tecmo Bowl. Next up is baseball. Like Touchdown Football, it's kinda hard to make an argument for a title about a sports game when your competition has the better one. This title looks just a tad better than the Intellivision Baseball.
which was released almost 9 years before this title.
The swing mechanic is odd. You have to hold down the button and release it to have your player swing. That is freaking stupid. Every baseball game I have ever played, other than this one, has had one simple control mechanic. You hit a button on the controller and the player swings the bat. How hard is that? But I guess the Atari folks just wanted to be different. Good for you. The playing field is very small, and once you take the field, your pitches... Wait. Your pitch... Just give me a minute while I figure this out. Hold on. Pitching is actually... Damn, I thought I had it. Why am I throwing the damn ball to the baseman? Damn it. This title is bad. It's bad. Just move on. Last but not least is Hat Trick. Notice the trend here? Hat Trick would have looked nice and been a nice title back in 1982. It's basically like playing an upgraded 80s version of Pong. Why would you play this when that same friend who owns Tecmo Bowl and happens to just live 6 minutes away from you owns ice hockey for the NES as well? You know what? At that point I would have just talked to the parents of my friend and had them adopt me. Why leave his house? There's very little to do here. The playing field is extremely slow. The players are too big for the field and it could have done better. But we got this. Or rather, the 7800 folks got this. Sorry guys. So after group play for each console, 2 games advance, ranked number 1 and 2. On the SG-1000, Bomberman and N-Sub advance, with Bomberman seated number 1. On the NES, Dragon Slayer and Ghostbusters advance, with Dragon Slayer seated first. The Sega Master System has ALF and F-16 Fighter advancing. ALF is the number 1 seed. Last is the 7800. Karateka and Touchdown Football advanced to the knockout round, with Karateka seated number 1. Now, here is the bracket layout after the final 8 are set. Now, it's on to the knockout round. First up,
Bomberman versus F-16 Fighter.
on one side you have a well-known franchise in its very early days, and then you have F-16 Fighter. Was it trying to cash in on the Top Gun craze? Or was it trying to do something that the console was just not capable of doing in that time? And that was to create a good flight simulation style game. Who knows? But at least you can pretend to be playing as a Top Gun pilot, while Bomberman leaves no room for any imagination. It is slow, it has no power-ups, it is Bomberman at its most basic form. With that said, Bomberman advances. Next up, one game is a watered down and a totally different port from the arcade hit, and the other is a sports title. Yet for all the criticism I gave Touchdown Football when compared to its counterparts in either console, the Master System or NES, you can still play it and get some enjoyment out of it. Dragon Slayer has virtually no enjoyment. None. It's like it had its fun soul sucked out and sold to the devil. It was repackaged and then sold to the kids during the NES days. It is evil. Pure evil. Dragon Slayer advances. No surprise here. On the other side of the bracket, we got
ALF versus N-Sub.
Now back in the day, if you snagged a good property to make a game out of, you were one step closer to making money. So when Sega snagged the rights to make an ALF game, who was actually quite popular in those days, I am sure they thought it was going to be instant money. Unfortunately, someone forgot to tell the programmers that a good game goes beyond just a good license. N-Sub is extremely basic for a sub game, sure. One screen only? I mean, come on. But what are we, in 1977? That was okay back in the Atari days. At least add another screen, for God's sake. 2 screens at least. 2! Not even that. And yet somehow, I'd rather play N-Sub over ALF any day. ALF advances. Next.
Karateka versus Ghostbusters.
One game took an awesome movie franchise, all the potential it had, and flushed it down the toilet. The other took a very popular fighting beat-em-up game and just flushed it down the toilet along with Ghostbusters. Both games had huge potential and both failed to deliver. But Karateka is brought down by the fact that the pacing is so painfully slow and it takes place along one axis. But Ghostbusters had so much potential. If you get the rights to such a kick-ass movie license, and you get this as a result, you have failed miserably. Ghostbuster advances. So now the semifinals are set. Here is the updated bracket. Who will emerge as the winner? Let's see. First semifinal match. Playing both games takes a hell of a lot of patience. Both quickly go through that patience like a lightsaber through butter. The only question is, which kills that patience faster? An arcade title that has some of the worst and slowest gameplay on the NES and is pure evil? Or a very early version of Bomberman that will have you guessing when the fun begins? Which of the two is the lesser evil? Dragon Lair takes the match and advances to the final. For the second semifinal match, it's if you play Alf, you immediately realize you have no idea what to do, how to do it, or want to play long enough to figure out how to do it. Ghostbusters is the type of game that you keep playing long enough because you keep hoping at some point it's gonna get better. It has to get better than this. It just has to. It doesn't. Oh God, it doesn't. But at least it's not an immediate realization like when you play Alf. That game just clocks you on the nose immediately. Alf advances to the final. So it comes down to this. The final set. Two games from competing consoles to see which of the two will be crowned worst game of the third generation of consoles. And after careful consideration, taking into account graphics, gameplay, controls, and overall end product result, the winner is
Dragon's Lair.
but barely, just barely. The final reminds me of that FIFA final we just saw a couple days ago between Argentina and France. You think one is winning when all of a sudden the other makes a run, and it was close. And just like that game, Dragon Slayer wins by penalty kicks. No, not really, just speaking metaphorically. It was close though. Both games are crap. No, trust me, they're crap. Avoid them if possible. Please avoid them. Bomberman comes in third place. Now this generation was very difficult, especially when trying to narrow down the crap on the massive NES library. There are a lot of bad games there. What was the point of this logo? I mean, come on. While you may not agree with Dragon Slayer being number one, I think we can agree that the game is utter crap repackaged to look like an NES cartridge. It sucks. It's bad. Avoid it, please. If you could choose one title as the worst of the third generation, which would it be? Share your pick with us and be back here next month for Generation 4. Now, who takes the prize among the growing consoles that hit the market for that generation? Don't miss it. The winner will shock you. So keep watching, keep playing, and as always, take care of yourselves. Okay, I think I got it now. Give me a... Oh, come